Hello, this is Kevin Kaplan from the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health team at the Children's Resource Center in Bowling Green, Ohio. This is another one of the ways that we're trying to support parents at this challenging time. And this is a recorded version of one of our parent chats. The topic of this one is alternatives to saying no. I picked this topic because I thought it was something that parents were curious and wondering about, and it is a topic flying around out there on the internet, and there's a lot of different ideas and information. The information I'm sharing with you today is from evidence-based information and some strategies from the Devereaux Center. The first thing I think that we need to think about when saying no is, why do we say no? And I think it's a lot because of adults being so busy with playing multiple roles, working from home, maybe working multiple jobs, maybe having multiple children, and just having a lot on their plate. And in addition to that, some parents are playing teacher and clean up and cook, and the list goes on, right? Behavior is also frustrating. It gets under our skin, it can be repetitive, it can be just downright irritating, especially when children repeat things, make the same mistakes over and over, and they test the limits. It's like, how many times do I have to tell you? We know as adults and understand the reasons why things are the way they are in most cases. We know why we don't want them to do something. We know why we want them to stop listening. Or stop and listen. We know that we just want them to act right. We know that we know why we need them to quit doing something. But do they always know? That leads into the question of, why do they do that? And when I say that, I'm referring to challenging behavior. So, with adults being so busy, children do have a natural need for our attention. Seeking attention is not a sign of weakness or a sign of sissiness or a sign of being needy. It's actually something that's hardwired into us. And humans, the research around the world really supports the fact that we need connection and attachment. We need relationships. We need strong bonds with our caregivers. And children have this natural need for our attention. And what happens often when we're really busy is they get less of it. And so that behavior that's frustrating is communicating a need. It can be, if not to get attention, which is obtaining something, it can be to avoid something. So it may be to avoid a sibling. It may be to avoid a time of the day that they don't like. It may be to avoid an activity they don't like. It may be to avoid some sort of sensory experience. It is also an opportunity, though, to build their skill and increase our bond. If we're taking a moment when you have time to help them build that skill, that will really increase the bond that we have with that child. Good, strong relationship and bond does not come from birth. There are physiological things that happen at birth that do translate to a connection. But this long-lasting attachment is something that needs to be nurtured and supported. So it's easy to say, well, I do everything that I can for this child. Of course, we have a good bond. Well, the research tells us that the bond you have with the child, or the attachment you have with the child, is really based on their perception. And so just as though, if you have a friend your friendship with them is measured by your perception of that friendship. If your friend hasn't been there for you, but says that they're a really good friend to you, you're gonna, think, well, no, you're not. So, and I'm not saying you haven't been there for your child, but that's what the research is telling us is that it's the child's perception, and so it's normal for children to have different attachment needs, different connection needs. And so if it seems like your child is seeking your attention more, it could be because you're busier. It could be because you have less attention to give them. Or it could also be because your child maybe just needs a little bit more of that attention, because some children don't need as much, and that doesn't make them stronger, because the research shows us that the stronger an attachment is or connection is with the child, the less likely they are to have challenges, not just with that caregiver, but like throughout life. This extends way beyond the moment. So when we think about behavior, we really need to think about it as communicating something. Children repeat things, and this type of repetitive thing where they're making the same mistakes, having the same challenges, part of that is typical brain building, experience building stuff, right? You don't, when you learn something new, you don't do it right the first time. Think back of maybe the first job you ever had and the skills that you were asked to do. And, maybe you had to ask a lot of questions. Maybe someone had to help you a lot. Maybe there were things that you didn't need a lot of help with, but it's important to note just that, children are new to this world. And unless they've already had the experience many times and practiced it and perfected it, chances are that, even as adults, we learn things and we still have challenges with those, right? And to add on to that, children test the limits. They really explore to what extent they can push things. And a lot of that is normal and has to do with children learning about their environment and whether or not it's safe and secure. And I sometimes will think of it as, a house and the walls in that house. So, you know, when you get a house or an apartment, you might look around to make sure that everything is secure, that everything, when you go to bed, you make sure the windows are closed. And anyways, if you didn't have those walls, that sense of security around you, those limits, then you wouldn't feel safe. And in the same way, children test the limits because they want to see where is that boundary. But they're not consciously thinking, am I safe or not? But that's what their brain is thinking. And so if we stay consistent with those limits, that reinforces children's sense of safety and security. So alternatives to saying no, I pulled a couple different types of strategies for this. One type of the strategy is a short-term strategy, like in the moment. The other type is long-term. So we could think of this as a long-term investment, sort of like saving for your retirement. It's not something you necessarily have to do right now, but your life will be so much better off if you start it now and then you see the rewards later. So that's how I've broken these strategies up. And because adults are so busy, it can really help to have a schedule or routine to set the regularity and predictability in the home, and to help also, because you're going over the schedule, initially when you first start it, you're probably going to need to go over it daily to remind them of it, especially if you've changed some things. But having a consistent schedule is really supportive and can help reduce those challenging times when we may need to say no more often, or don't, stop, quit, which are those other words that go along with no. And by doing this, depending on your kiddo's age, you might do the schedule with them, asking them for their input. And this gives an opportunity for you to connect and bond further. Because behavior is frustrating, children really need us to stay calm. When we get frustrated and we go from here to here, then children are going to go from here to here. And so it's really important that we practice our own calm, whether that be taking a few deep breaths. And hey, it may seem silly to take a few deep breaths in the middle of some sort of maybe argument or discrepancy, but what you're doing more than just taking a few deep breaths. You're showing your child that you can calm down, and you're showing them that this is how to calm down. Even if you don't visibly on the outside show that you're taking 3 deep breaths, if you're just casually breathing in, getting some more oxygen to your brain to help the blood flow to your brain so that you can think more clear, then you'll be able to respond in a better way. The research says that when we get worked up, we revert to our emotional brain. And then obviously if there's a safety concern, we resort to our safety brain, which is an even lower, more primitive functioning part of the brain. So when we think of frustrating behavior, you can think of all different things that might get you worked up. But the biggest thing is that you stay calm, you focus on your own calm, because this can help them stay calm. And another thing you can do is use assertive language. You can notice without judging, give prompts, or offer choices. Because children repeat behaviors, it can help to have visuals to support and remind children of the rules and expectations. Because children test the limits, it's really important to enforce those limits consistently, meaning all the caregivers need to be consistent on the same page, and that if you're not, you come to a compromise behind the scenes. Because if you stay divided, that's going to work against you. And then praise desired behavior. So it's not all about telling them what they did wrong or having those redirected experiences where you're constantly setting the limit. It's also about noticing when they're following the limit, because children love to be recognized and given attention. So what better way than to reinforce the rules you've already set? Like when you see them following the rules, it doesn't mean that you just walk by like, oh, things are great. No, that's an opportunity to take 30 seconds to praise them on that behavior. I like the way you're playing the game with your brother or sister or whatever quietly, or sitting in the couch or sitting on the chair quietly, or playing with that game nicely, or using gentle hands, whatever it may be. And those strategies are in a little more detail here. And as I said, these are from the Devereaux Center for Resilient Children. So in the moment, offering choices, offer to them 2 positive choices when it's appropriate. And the basic formula is that you may blank or blank. And then you follow that up with which will you choose, or which is better for you. In their example, you may wear the blue socks or the red ones. Which is better for you? And so you can fill in the blank. Using assertive communication is just doing kind of what the opposite of what I think is most of our instincts, which is to tell children what not to do. Instead, we're just telling them what to do, which is so much more helpful for them, because this gives them information that they can actually use. Because when we say no, don't, stop, quit, we don't actually teach them anything. We might think that no means no, don't do that, but what do they do then? Like, if you're a child and you're focused on doing something, and I'm empathizing with children here, you're really wanting to do whatever that is. That's why you're doing it. And so if someone tells you no, well, What do I do now? Right? So telling them what to do, if they're hanging out the window of the car, tell them to sit back in their seat and put their seatbelt on. Not, no, don't hang out of the car. That's just an example. Hopefully your children are not doing that. So after that, you might think about assigning positive intent, giving a clear limit and a boundary, and then offering an alternative behavior. So we're assigning positive intent just by recognizing that whatever they're doing was to achieve some goal that they had set in their mind, whatever that is. I see that you were trying to get a cookie from the cookie jar. And then you would set a limit. We don't climb on the counter. The counter is not for climbing. And then we would give them an acceptable alternative. You can ask for help to get a cookie. You can ask your sister or me or whatever it is. And that is kind of like using assertive communication, except you're also setting a boundary. And then you're also recognizing that they really weren't trying to cause harm to anything. They weren't trying to make trouble. They were just trying to get a cookie. And so you're recognizing that positive intent, which can really help to build empathy. Then in the long term, you might think of a daily schedule, some way that you can lay out what is going to happen in general for the day. Doesn't have to be every detail, just in general. And then hang that up somewhere. If there's visuals, it can really help younger children, because then you can refer back to those visuals and you can point at them and say what's coming up next. This can really help children feel like their routine is more consistent, and it can reduce those challenging times. Then you can display those pictures so that they're accessible and viewable to children. So we don't want to put them way up by the ceiling, or we don't want to put them on top of the fridge. We want them somewhere where they can see them and where we can talk about it with them. So, if they're not ready to go or do something that we're going to be doing as a family, it's part of our schedule, then we can take them to the schedule and say, hey, look, this is what's on the schedule next. And kind of try to reset their thinking there. And like I said earlier, you can even make it part of like a family discussion so that you're all deciding on the schedule, kind of, giving some input. Picture rule cards are very similar, except instead of the schedule, we're just putting up some rules. Maybe these are rules that are absolute rules in your household, like no one can do them, such as hitting or jumping on the couch or whatever it may be. And then having a picture of what that looks like. So especially those youngest children, so that they know what it is exactly and that they're not wondering, or maybe so that we know for sure they understand, because having that visual really helps the youngest of children think through visual images in their mind instead of through words like older children do. And then another one that can help out in the long term, reducing those challenges and times when we need to say no, is connecting rituals. Create intentional opportunities for children to build those relationships with those adults. And the way to do that is just having a little moment here and there. Maybe you could schedule it in your day where you have eye contact, you're looking at them, you have some gentle touch and appropriate touch, and a present adult. That means the adult's not on their cell phone or not talking to someone else, and then they're being playful. So it could be telling a joke, it could be looking at a picture and laughing, whatever it may be. So incorporating those aspects, eye contact, touch, presence, in a playful situation, is how you build or strengthen connection with your kiddo. So here's some examples of images, and these are all available on the internet. If you Google or Bing or search them in whatever search engine you have, you should be able to find them. I would just search visual routines or visual schedule or visual steps or something to that effect, and you'll see some of these, like rules for the iPad, what to do when you're upset, choices, routines, and then cue cards for what to do instead of XYZ. And these can be on a ring, like, printed out into little squares, and then a hole punch, and then put on a ring so that you can flip through them. You can take them with you when you go somewhere. You can also hang them up in a strip. You can hang them up in a block. So whatever format you think might work best for you, kind of play around with it. And if you have questions, I'll have my email at the end. But the takeaway from this is really to seek first to understand that children's behavior has some meaning or is communicating something. They're trying to avoid or obtain something. What is that? Let's try and understand that so that we can make a better decision about how to approach it. Observe if possible, observe the behavior without judgment, and maybe inquire or ask questions. So if they're doing something that we don't approve of, but it's not causing anyone harm, maybe we could talk to them a little bit about that. And if we do that, wait and listen patiently for them to answer. Try not to rush them. This isn't a punitive or punishment thing. This is a let's work together to figure this out. Because if children have some kind of say or buy-in, they're more likely to comply. And we would have way fewer issues if they complied with us versus if we controlled them. So this is a way to get them to comply. And so if we do talk to them about it, wait and listen patiently for answers. Children's brains take a little bit longer to process information. And so not using too much wording, just try to keep it simple. And then set consistent limits and rules. Support it with visuals if you can. And then problem solve with them, like offer choices and focus on the positive behavior. Shine that flashlight on what you want to see more of. Thanks for joining me, and there's my email contact, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates on future videos and visit our Facebook at CRC Infant and Early Childhood Connection. Thanks again.